On today's episode of the Grind Hours Podcast, an early Saturday morning episode of the Grind Hours Podcast, at least when we're recording this. It's an all baseball pod, but it's all over the map. Really quickly, honestly, I might call this the return because the guest that we have on now this is his first solo appearance, which I think is a record as well, to come on with a group of people first before you come on by yourself. That would be the co-host of the children's programming podcast, which you'll hear about later, Matthew Dixon.
Good morning, sir.
So, if you haven't listened to the podcasts, this is the first podcast since the break, first podcast of August, really quickly. This is being recorded on the Saturday that my youngest brother Thomas is being moved into college. So hopefully Thomas doesn't get COVID and he can continue or start his college experience in some semblance of normalcy. And, let's go Scranton. I forget what their mascot is. So I'll look it up before the end of the podcast. That's bad by me. But starting off, Dixon, you invited yourself on, kind of. I
Yes,
have one
yes, I wanted to do that.
about your Mets, just because it seems like everybody that I know in recent memory is a Mets fan instead of a Yankee fan. That's fine, but we'll talk about your Mets at the end of the pod. What you want to talk about and get off your chest, and I think it's going to be the meat and potatoes of this podcast, is Joe Kelly.
Yes.
And in your mind, the wrongful suspension of Joe Kelly. I will go second because people on this podcast have heard my defense and what I have to say about Joe Kelly and why I think he's a clown. I want your defense on why he shouldn't be suspended and bad dirt on his name should be reprimanded.
I would like to hear this bad dirt on his name because I'm not familiar myself.
You can't throw at people. You can't throw at people and then be a child about it. I'm fine with you throwing at somebody and standing up and getting ready to fight. But to stick your tongue out and act like you're 6 years old and say, fuck you, bitch, after he didn't have any control in the inning. Yes, he hit two people, but I also don't enjoy throwing at somebody on a 3-0 pitch.
I think you have to really look at who you're throwing at. I mean, if it was just a normal game where you're just throwing at, some random player that you happen to have a beef with, that's one thing. But I think it's just the entire thing with the major leagues now where they have to, want to go after the Astros because of all the shit that they did. And it's I just don't think it's proper to judge the guy for wanting to get back at a team, especially when they took a championship away from, maybe he wasn't on the team at the time, but he took a championship away from, the team he's currently on. And I'm sure a lot of
thing too is he wasn't on the Dodgers at all. He was on the Red Sox, who beat them. He beat the Astros in 2018. I don't get it. I'm all for the Dodgers throwing at the Astros because they feel scorned for losing, two championships because of the system that the Astros created. But Joe Kelly has no beef. He is not a dog in the fight. So I don't understand why he's the guy that has his panties in a bunch.
I don't think it necessarily means you have to have a dog in the fight. I think it's just, like I said, the entire league is retaliating against the Astros because pretty much they did not get any punishment for what they did. So I understand why these players are wanting to turn against the Astros because, that's something that's one of the golden rules is you don't cheat on the game.
Look, if anybody's as upset that the Astros cheated through their run, it's me because I really feel that the Yankees were the better team in 2017. But I don't know. I don't. Something doesn't sit right with me that this is the guy who is the poster child for this. He wasn't the first pitcher to throw at somebody. Somebody on the Royals already did it. He didn't have any dog in the fight, and I can understand if it's done in LA. This is being done in Houston, and I think the visiting teams actually have a cover here because if the fans were allowed in the stands, nobody would be throwing at Houston in their home ballpark. Nobody. And
I don't
if you
agree with that. I
did,
think that everybody's going to throw at them no matter what.
no, but not in their home ballpark. Are you not? You'd be berated. And somebody's coming after you. There's some Houstonian that's hopping the barriers and coming after you. Or after the game, you got a horde by the hotel.
Now making Joe Kelly the figure of it, I think he's just been made the figure of it just because of how, how vocal he was about it and how like animated he was on the field about the whole thing. So I wouldn't call him the face of it. I'm just saying that I don't think he deserved an 8-game suspension for throwing at somebody when it's the equivalent of a 20-game suspension for something like that. That should be like maybe like a 2 or a 3-game, And I know we're in a situation right now where because of COVID, everybody's trying to be a little more careful and not to clear the benches. But it seems that the only reason people are clearing the benches are because of the Astros.
No, but I think that's the reason why the 8 games was so. That's the tag is. I think Manfred's looking at the sport, and at the time, the Miami Marlins didn't play for a week, and nobody knew what the state of the season was when this was going on. So I feel like that's even more incentive for Manfred to throw down a harsh punishment because he already said that if you throw at the Astros, you're going to get suspended. So if he didn't suspend Kelly for at least the 2 games, he would be going back on his own word and looking like a doormat, and he doesn't want to do that. And 2, I think he was looking at the situation and going, we already have one team that's impacted 4 other teams that isn't playing right now because of COVID. God forbid somebody on either of the Dodgers or the Astros had it, and you get into this scuffle and you're breathing on people, then like that's 2 other teams out of commission. So I understand it. Maybe I'd feel differently if Joe Kelly didn't act like a complete 6-year-old child as he was stalking off the mound, sticking his tongue out at people and just not being a man about it. If he threw at him and was like, yeah, I threw at you, what's up, let's go, then that's different. I think I'd be on your side if he just backed himself up and then didn't pout on his teammates' podcast, which is a homer move. Go on a national radio show. Don't go on your teammates' podcast.
You'd prefer if he went to talk to an actual show rather than just the one.
Call up Cowherd. He lives in LA.
I'm sure he'd take your call immediately.
Call up anybody in LA. I don't know. We'll take a quick break, but let's be a stand-up man, Joe Kelly, and stop being a child. All right, so this break's actually a little special. You'll hear from Dixon himself about his podcast. Back after this.
Hey kids, are those ancient records getting tiring in these troubled times? Finally time to get your ass off the couch and make something of yourself? Well, of course not, because there's yet another podcast you'll be recommended and not actually listen to.
Put on your fun hats, we're on our way.
You're damn right. All jokes aside, if you're a fan of the Grind Hours podcast with Joe Leo, you'll be right at home here. Want to know that the Ford Bronco is back?
Guys, the Ford Bronco is back.
Indeed, the Ford Bronco is back. Alongside those pressing news snippets, you'll get complaints about the Wilpons, Bobby Bonilla, and the New York Mets, as well as riveting life advice from the resident love swami Nicholas J. Parodies.
I saw condoms in my son's plastic bag when we arrived at the house. 2 packs with 36 each. Jesus Christ, dude.
Subscribe at your local podcast depository, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. New episodes are posted weekly every Friday. For our weekly advice segment, please send us a message over at anchor.fm/children's-programming-pod. We always look forward to hearing from you.
All right, in the first block, I don't think we gain any ground with this Joe Kelly situation. I hear you better now. I understand your position better now. I don't agree with it still,
I don't think I'm
but
going to be able to convince you because I know you're too much of a traditionalist, but I kind of like the little bit of
back
mind
and
games with
forth.
players. Yeah, I like the back and forth.
Look, I converted to letting Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame. I don't think I'm a traditionalist per se anymore.
Oh, you
I still
scoundrel.
have values.
You absolute scoundrel. You have zero values.
This block, let's talk about the St. Louis Cardinals, who have played,
4
as of
games.
recording this, I think 5 games, 4 or 5 games. They are playing 3 doubleheaders, 3 7-inning doubleheaders next week to make up, or try to make up, for some of the games that they missed. And I don't know how this team is going to be on its own 2 feet after next week. I
There's
really
just
don't.
there's like 1,000 injuries right now, especially the pitchers. So this is what's causing it is that they're having too many games that are going double headers. Like there's just way too many games going on for this particular time period. But part of me doesn't want to blame the league completely because the players are the ones that drag this along long enough.
Yeah.
So in essence, they're creating the problem because they knew in their head that there might be a possibility of games getting canceled because of this. So would you rather have less games and then have a bunch get canceled to where you have to do double headers? Maybe they didn't think, oh, we have to actually make them up, but I mean, like I said, if you're like the Marlins or I don't know, the Pirates, you don't really care. But but
Marlins are actually doing well.
they are doing
They're
well
playing
despite the fact
well.
they missed a bunch of games. But to answer the question, I just think like the amount of injuries is just showing that this isn't working, and I really don't think that the season's going to get finished in my mind.
You
Just
know what I
because of
think is
how
going to happen?
what's that?
I think I think position players are going to be pitching in these doubleheaders. I really do. I think
I would not
you're
be
going to
surprised.
see. I think you're going to see maybe not in the fifth and sixth and seventh innings of games, even if it's a competitive game. I think just to save the arms of the pitchers because of the expanded rosters, I think you're going to be seeing a position player being asked about and just try to get some outs
I mean,
because
you
it's
have
not
players in the
fair.
minors to do this. I mean, you could bring up maybe a couple AAA guys, but they only have the short roster right now on reserve. So would you technically have to? Would they be able to call on somebody from the minors to come play in the league now?
I think because there's still a taxi squad, like I still think you get a heightened taxi squad if you're playing a
Mhm.
doubleheader. So yeah, they could call some of their AAA pitchers from their alternate AAA site, but those pitchers haven't been pitching really. They've been
Yeah.
doing simulated games. So
I mean, you could also take a bunch of not your minor. You could take a bunch of your relievers and have them do like 2 innings at a time. But what's going to happen there is you're going to have them do that every day.
right, and blow their arms out.
Exactly.
And I think what you're seeing a lot now um, with the pitchers specifically is they're going through a dead arm period. And Ron Darling talked about this on the Tony Kornheiser show this week. There's a point in time where during spring training, every pitcher goes through it where they don't feel like they know where the baseball is going. They're just throwing it and they're hoping for the best while also not really feeling the best physically. And it's just because you've been throwing for so much after not throwing all winter. You come to spring training, you throw for 3 weeks. On that third week, you're like, my arm's a little tired, and you just sort of hope for the best. I think that's what's happening now. Got ready for the season. The season was postponed. They're coming back after 4 or 5 months of a layoff and being asked to pitch in a major league game. with
It's
2
not
weeks.
gonna work.
Right.
It's
It's not. It's a foolhardy plan, and it's malpractice, I think, if you're Major League Baseball. I think the Players Association has a real argument here. Is one, you're threatening the lives of pitchers, not only by asking them to pitch in doubleheaders like this, but also you're ruining their possible salaries in the offseason and
But
their
I'm guessing
future livelihood.
Is it right to blame the Players Association for dragging the whole thing along for too long, or is it incorrect to blame baseball because the only reason they're having the season is because of money?
Both. I think both sides are at fault. I think the players are at fault for dragging it along and thinking that they've missed games and saying, well, bow down to this because we've already been swindled before. So I think they held too much of a grudge and didn't see the bigger picture. And I mean, if they get in a bubble in Arizona and Florida in the middle of late May, early June, that's when both those states became hotspots, and you could have created a sort of bubble like the NBA is doing, where they're in Florida right now, where that's the highest cases per day, and they've created a bubble, and no one's outside of that bubble. So I think it wouldn't have been enjoyable for the players because they'd be sweating their asses off in Arizona and Florida in June and July. But
I mean, it's different because the NBA is pretty much almost done with their season, so you really only have to worry about the other half of the NBA that makes the playoffs for the bubble. And if you could say, like, if you were keeping all the teams from the Grapefruit League in Florida, you could have them play in Miami and the Tropicana Field.
Yeah, I really think if you use Miami and Tropicana as two sites and you split the 15 teams up and you were playing at those two sites, kind of like the World Baseball Classic, where they use Miami as I don't know, there was a better solution than this, and there's a better solution than killing your player. Like, this is an NFL move. This is a Roger Goodell move where it's like, I don't care about my players. I just want to fill the games, get my money, and try to continue to grow the game globally. That's what Manfred's doing here.
And it's the kind of move that could end up ending the season, and if they still have to pay players, they're going to end up bankrupting teams like the Marlins.
Yeah, I agree. It's a shit show of a situation, and I think the handling of it on both sides is just ridiculous and unprepared, and showing why baseball at a higher level is in a real crisis right now. Let's move on, and we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back talking about your Metsies.
You know, a lot can happen in 7 minutes, and luckily, that's how long it takes me to tell a story. My name is Aaron Califato, and I'm the creator of 7 Minute Stories. I'm proud to partner with Evergreen Podcasts, and I'd like to invite you to join me on this journey. I'm going to take you on some crazy roller coaster rides using my unique extemporaneous storytelling style, and together, we're going to try to make sense of the world, all through the art of storytelling, and all in approximately 7 minutes.
All right, so through the first two blocks, we talked about Joe Kelly, and we talked about the state of baseball with the Cardinals, and, you know, some of the solutions as to what the hell is going to go on and how they're going to make up games and handle this situation further. But let's pivot to something of kind of happiness. The Mets have been on a semi-roll. My favorite player on the Mets, Jeff McNeil, made an amazing catch a couple of days ago before
Mike
banging.
Baxter-esque catch that, you know, he's glad he didn't get injured.
I'm happy. Well, that's the thing. I saw the catch. I was watching the game with my girlfriend, and she's a big Mets fan. So I was watching the game. He makes the catch. She was looking at her phone at the time, and I reacted like, there was a banshee in the room. And I was like, "Did you see that?" She goes, "No." So I rewound the play, showed her. She went nuts. And then we both sat down on the couch and looked at each other like, "Oh my God, I hope he's okay." Because we didn't see McNeil slam his glove down and lay on the ground knowing something's wrong. As a collective, how are you feeling about the ups and downs of your Mets season 2.5 weeks in?
I mean, as a Mets fan, like I've heard people say it, the Mets sucking is the most normal thing that could go on right now. So I'm perfectly content with what's going on. From a fan standpoint, nothing surprising here. Them losing a lot of pitchers to injuries. It just happens to be an international pandemic that's causing it. But I'm liking the fact that Pete Alonso is finally hitting again. That's great to hear. I'm really happy that Andres Gimenez is taking initiative of this situation and really becoming a great player through all of this. He looks like he could really be a good trade fodder for the team later in the time when they're going to trade for some washed up free agent. But I actually just bought his rookie card, so I'm happy that he's playing good because I wanted to go up in value.
Keep that.
Yeah.
He's going to be he looks like he's going to be a player. He's probably the one guy in the majors that is taking full advantage of the situation right now.
It's a great time for rookies to do that because you're in the spotlight right now, so everything abnormal that's going on, you're gonna stand out the most.
And he's basically stealing at bats. If the Mets thought they had a problem with too many bats, they just added another one in the mix. And he's pretty good with the glove. He's not bad. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that the Mets farm system, that's another thing. The Mets farm system is so obliterated right now because of what Van Wagenen has done to it. So it's positive to see that there are players that they brought up. I don't think, was he expected to come up this soon?
I think he was a guy who was probably a year away.
Yeah, I think it was. I believe it was next year he was due to come up. But it's good to see that rookie players are taking advantage of this. I mean, because there's no minor league baseball being played, so really the only players that are going to have a chance to make anything are the taxi squad players that happen to get called up. But I'm happy he's doing well because I think he could be a good prospect for the Mets overall.
How are you feeling about the Lion King, Yoenis Cespedes?
Oh my God. Cespedes, when the Cespedes trade happened years ago, it was a great thing because it really brought life to that team towards the end of the season. And obviously it's what brought them to almost winning a championship. But I think he's just been such a prima donna through this whole thing. And him getting injured, like I said, it's just a Mets thing to do. Players always come here. They come and get injured, or they have too big egos and they can't handle New York. I mean, I think he's the type of guy that could handle New York, but I just think he was a toxic presence in that clubhouse because I didn't see any real reaction from people when he left. Like, it's just like, oh, Cespedes is gone. That's great. I mean, he hasn't really been around the last 2 years because he's been injured.
Well, I think that's the new crew. Like, the only people that are on the team from 15 are DeGrom and Syndergaard.
And Conforto.
Oh, yeah, and Conforto. So 3 guys really know who this dude is. If you're Alonso or McNeil or JD Davis, you're like, who the hell is this guy? And I mean, I hope you can help us win, but I don't really know you, dude. And if you want to do whatever and just screw off back to, I don't even know where did he go back to his farm?
I don't know. Like I saw, I follow this MLB meme page, and then somebody saw him in a mall like the day after the whole incident happened, and they took a picture with him. I mean, he's leaving for COVID-related illness or COVID-related problems, yet he's in a public mall interacting with fans. He's just a weird guy.
He's one of the dudes that, I mean, he is Soriano from Major League.
He really is.
He's the type of guy that if
that's a great comparison.
He wanted to, could be an absolute star. Like, he could be the star of this town.
He could, but he makes too many mistakes, and he's going out and, you know, didn't he have the wild boar incident that got him injured in the first place the second time around?
His horse fell in a hole because it saw a wild boar, and he fell off of the horse and re-injured his ankles. He's the type of dude where it's just like, if you actually figured it out, because I don't think he's figured it out yet. If he actually figured it out, he'd be the Lion King. He'd be the king, he'd be the guy in this town when it comes to baseball.
I mean, he was for a 3-month period until he just kind of, you know, fell off in 2015. But I just think he's too nuts, and this is not the kind of guy we need on our team right now.
I think that's a good place to end.
Sure.
Dixon, we heard about your podcast at the beginning with the ad.
Yes.
But tell the people where they can find you, what you got going on, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you can find Children's Programming. We're a variety show podcast with our good friend Nick Parodies. He's my co-host. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts, at your local podcast depository, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, your mom's house, anywhere you want to find it. You can find us at Children's Programming. That's Children's Programming, nothing in the middle, on Instagram. And then CHI, Chick Programming, everywhere else. We usually post our episodes every Friday. We record on Thursdays. So if you're interested in sports, we always talk a lot about the Mets. We always talk a lot about Knicks, Red Sox. Frequent topics of conversation are things that are going on in the world. You know, the likes of O.J. Simpson joining Twitter, Nick getting a Mustang. Everything you want to hear. It's been a really enjoyable experience doing it with Nick because I think we get along really well. And if you want to find me, you can find me at BLU Zodiac Pictures on Instagram. That's really the only place I post for my photography stuff. And that's all about me.
Nick is getting Hollywood on us. He's getting a Mustang. He just got a new tattoo.
I've told Nick he's going to end up being
real Hollywood on us.
He's getting real Hollywood. He could do the whole, like I said, the cocaine and hookers thing. I have no problem with him doing that. Just let me live my normal life. So I think I can be the straight man, and he can be the Nick Parodies of the world.
You'll be his David Cohn to Nick's Doc Gooden.
I'd like to think that I could be his Pete Rose to my A-Rod to his Pete Rose.
On this side of the coin, jdatasports.blogspot.com. I've got the Jamal Adams piece in the works. It's almost done. It's going to be out in the week that you're hearing this. That piece will be out, and then the following week, hopefully, will be the strike season versus the pandemic season. A deep dive into. I went SB Nation Dorktown level. I've pulled the clippings out of the proverbial newspaper box.
I'm excited.
So be on the lookout for that. And of course, this podcast. If you've reached this point in the podcast, please like, subscribe, share this podcast with anybody who you see fit. Download the podcast. And it's closing time. It's good to be back, but it's closing time. You don't have to go home. But you can't stay here.